There are two basic types of judgments. There are factual judgments, and there are normative judgments. Factual judgments are judgments as to the way things have been in the past, are in the current, or will be in the future. Like say predictions in the future, or any belief about the way things they are. The basic judgment about the natural world or supernatural world, but it's distinguished by what it is not. A factual judgment is not a normative judgment. Now, a normative judgment is a judgment about the way things should be in the present, or should have been in the past, or should be in the future. A normative judgment is a judgment based on the way about what is the ideal world, what is good or what is bad. Now, the thing with normative judgments, they're not something that can be empirically verified, because there is no the good and bad have no mass or space or velocity. It is completely non-empirical. Like the normative judgments cannot be empirically verified. They are judgment about the way things are from a such as an ethical or moral standpoint, way things should be, from a from an ethical standpoint. But factual judgments, they are just judgments about the way things the way things are, not the way things should be or ought to be. So yeah, in the realm of the current epidemic, there seems to be some confusion as to those two different forms of judgment. Because I keep seeing people saying online, writing about the current death toll attributed to the coronavirus, as though that in itself is an argument about the way things should be handled or should have been handled, regarding the measures taken in response to the virus. Now, when you're saying the way things should be done, then you're making a normative judgment, not a factual one. The total death toll attributed to the virus is a factual judgment. Those are two categorically separate types of judgments that are being made. And so there's no way to there's no way to empirically, mathematically, or logically connect a factual judgment with a normative judgment. There's like this barrier between the two, and there's never any way to connect the two with the matters of certainty in terms of what would you call like mathematical certainty or logical certainty, to connect the two. So it's not enough to just throw out a number, a factual judgment number such as the death toll attributed to the coronavirus, say in the United States, and say, oh, that therefore we should be doing X or Y. We should be having, say, a mass mandate, or have the mandatory social isolation. We should shut down the so and so businesses. Those are all normative judgments. about the way things should be done in response to the virus, or should have been done. That is a normative judgment. And there's no way to logically connect the factual judgments about say the statistics in terms of the number of cases and death counts and and all those in the severity of symptoms observed, hospitalizations. There's no way to connect that to the normative judgment about the way things should be in terms of responding to the virus. Now, you may say that, well, there's a you can make these factual judgments about how much, about whether or not there would be more or less deaths given the measures taken. Yeah, you can make those judgments, of course, but there's no way to use logic to connect the two. There's just no way to do that. And also, there's in the area of factual judgment, there's a lot of uncertainty there as well. Especially considering in order to make the factual judgments meaningful from a standpoint of the pandemic, in terms of deciding what measures to take in response to the pandemic, needs to be factual judgments made about the causation, causal relationships between certain measures and certain outcomes. For instance, if with the masks, you have to make judgments that masks have a certain degree of efficacy in preventing transmissions, and you need to make judgments about whether or not a given death was the result of the virus and not some other comorbidity, such as some other pre-existing condition that the patient had, and you need to make other factual judgments about whether or not, even if in the short term you have a lower death counts from, say, locking down everything, but maybe there's be on the long term there'll be higher death counts due to less herd immunity. But so there's all sorts of factors there. So there's the uncertainty in the area of the factual judgment, and there's always going to be the debate and uncertainty in terms of normative judgments, because even if you have these certain degree of how these hospitalizations and deaths and so on, it's not necessarily the case that, well, maybe people should just go on with their lives anyway. There's no way to know for certain what the right thing to do is, just based on these certain conclusions, factual judgments about what these given numbers are, given statistics. Because, well, it may be the case that it's the quality of life in terms of having an open and being able to socialize, as we as social creatures, being able to mingle and socialize freely and openly, may be given a higher value than these the chances that there will be a higher in infection rate if people are mingling more. Maybe this higher value can be given to the importance of being able to live as social creatures, and there's no way to use science to figure out what is the basically the layperson's judgment on that is on equal footing with the expert, because there's no way to know what the expert doesn't have any way to know what is the best way, what is the way to live, what is the best way for society to exist, what is most important to a society. Is it most important to just everybody to live in a bubble and be isolated, even if it doesn't cause all sorts of deaths of despair as people become isolated, and increase the depression and suicides, which is another factor, which is another factual judgment, is how many increased deaths are going to be caused from, say, suicides. I think a lot of people. I think it is really hard on a lot of people. Myself, I seem to be different. This is like par for the course for me, but I'm fine psychologically, because I always seem to have these ideas that are that I come up with. I probably should share more. I'm not nearly as prolific in posting like videos and essays as I am in what's going on in my own mind. It seems to keep me occupied. However, I think I'd be more enriched if I was socializing more. I think it's enriching to socialize, even if psychologically you seem to be fine. I seem to be fine. I'm relatively happy, just being in content. Thinking about all of my concepts and ideas, but I still think it'd be nice to get out and socialize more. Because I think it's helpful and enriching to the individual. But I think for a lot of people, they're not so fine. I think there's a lot of people that psychologically it's having a huge impact on them, and even if they don't have, even if they don't develop even if there's no suicides, it's still decreasing the quality of life on a very high scale. So is that worth it to put people through this, even if there is, even if it is reducing the total infection rates, forcing people to become so isolated? Is it worth it to cause so much? So many, like say, cases of these depression. Basically, that's reducing the quality of life. So what's most important? And it could be a case that there's going to be a great. I mean, we've already had an epidemic of suicides in the U.S. Even before this epidemic. Now, what's going to do I think it's going to cause that epidemic suicides to only increase. I don't see how it's going to make it any better. So you need to factor that in too. So what's the way to live? How should we live as a society? But there's no debate. There's very little debate about how we should respond. What is most important? What is just keeping its numbers so low? Is that above all else? Why haven't we made that same judgment about other facets of society, such as making cars safer? I mean, every day for many decades, I think it's been on average, there's like 120 or so deaths per day in the U.S. from car accidents. Why hasn't there been an uproar over that? Is it because the corporations would have to spend more on each car, spend a few $100s more to add a little extra steel to each car? And so what causes the corporations to spend money, then the mainstream media, they don't want to cause them any trouble. And so there's nothing heard about that. I mean, if you add up all this, since the cars have been invented and safety features have been considered, I think it's still the total numbers are of deaths from automobile accidents that could have been prevented by making them safer, still is going to dwarf the numbers of total deaths attributed to the coronavirus in the U.S. So yeah, why isn't there any uproar over that? I don't know. Yeah, I think I do know. They don't want to upset the corporations, the big automakers. But yeah, and that makes me think of another thing about these lockdowns and shutdowns of businesses. Who has that hurt the most? It's hurt the small independent businesses, while the big businesses, they get exceptions. The large big box chains are treated as though, oh yeah, because they sell some essential items, then their whole store is treated as essential, even though they're selling many of the same items that the small independent stores, boutique stores would sell. But those small independent boutique stores were not selling the essential items, so they call them essential items, but so they were shut down for so long, and as a result, a lot of them are going out of business. Many restaurants are going out of business. So what's going to happen is the corporate chains, they have the scale to weather the storm, so to speak. And so now the big box corporate retailers will be stronger than ever with all the demand. As demand comes back, they'll be able to take on all the demand that would have otherwise gone to the independent businesses. So that's not fair. Doesn't seem fair to me. I mean, if things were so bad that we had to be so isolated to prevent all these infections, then why not just close all the stores? And if you really needed any essential items, any essential hardware, you just have to call up on the phone, or go online, have everything delivered. If things were so bad as far as infection transmissions, then why not shut everything down? Brick and mortar. But of course, that would have hurt the big box corporate retailers, and so that never happened. And so, because I think is this a plan to squeeze out all the independent retailers, so all the corporate, including the restaurant chains, can take over and take on all the demand that existed that would have before gone to the independent retailers and independent restaurateurs. That may be the plan, because it doesn't seem like things are that bad if the brick and mortars are left open, even though only a portion of what they sell are essential items. These big box retailers, and if it's okay for them to stay open, why can't the everything else, like the restaurants, open up completely, and gyms and salons? If things were that bad, they should have just closed all the big box retailers also. But I don't think things are that bad. And you see that when the governors come up and all their associates, cronies, come up to speak at pressers, they take their masks off to speak. That's supposed to be when the masks help the most. When they're speaking and they're indoors with the reporters there. Supposed to get that's the problem. That's what the masks are supposed to prevent, is get the aerosols, keep the aerosols from going out there in the room and going through the HVAC system and floating through the air. But that's when they take their mask off and say, "Wear your mask. I'm going to mandate you have to wear a mask." But they do that after taking their mask off and say, "Well, you want to, especially when you're talking, then you really want to put your mask on." But then they say that while they had to have their mask off, and then they put the mask back on when they stand back in the background when the mask is supposed to help the least. Seems like hypocrisy. It just tells me, it's a tell to me that they know that it's not, masks aren't that gonna, don't provide much benefit. But so mystery continues. Why are they insisting on everybody wearing masks if they take their masks off to speak in these press conferences indoors? And why, if the transmission's such a big problem, why have they let the big box retailers stay open throughout the pandemic, even though they're selling all sorts of non-essential items? I think they know it's not that. It's not as bad as it. I mean, there's not going to make that much of a difference, I should say. I think, and especially now, as things are clearly winding down, I think herd immunity is starting to be achieved. And the hospitalizations and death rates are going way down. Now, look, I think right now we're at, I think maybe at worst, similar to a bad flu season. And we never upended our lives just because of a bad flu season. Didn't close down all sorts of businesses. So why are we doing it now? I don't think we should have either in the past. And these are all like normative judgments about what's most important. Should we take? Is it worth isolating everybody, forcing them to be isolated, and covering up people's facial expressions with these masks? We're social creatures. And masks hide much of those the facial expressions that are so important to our socializing. How are people? I'm wondering how, like the young people, how are they gonna meet, get married, raise a family, if they're if the social gatherings are forbidden, and they have to wear these masks, hiding their facial expressions indefinitely into the future. Keep on pushing this. Oh, you're supposed to be. Oh, originally it was like, oh, we gotta flatten the curve. Oh no, and now it's just this indefinite. Oh well, we can't have any more, and you're still having some infections, so it could be a second wave, or you never know. And then what's it next going to be? Oh, we can't have any more infections. 0 infections. And once we have that, then you can take the masks off. Then we end the mandates. But yeah, so it's my normative judgment is that we should just end the whole lockdowns, end all the mask mandates. I think we should even forbid businesses from mandating masks. I'm not opposed to people allowing people to wear masks. If anybody wants to, go ahead. I mean, I remember way back when I was working at a hospital in a radiology department, and sometimes we'd work the front desks, and sometimes occasionally a patient would come in wearing a mask because they were immunocompromised. And so, yeah, when that happened, it wasn't like, oh, an immunocompromised patient is coming in, we've got to quick put our masks on. No, the patient was wearing the mask for their own protection. And so, yeah, I'm fine with that. If people want to wear a mask, that's great, fine. Go ahead. That's if they're concerned, if they work so well and you're so concerned, anybody wants to wear a mask, go ahead, wherever they want. Wear one 24/7 if they want to. I'm fine with that. I just don't think people should be forced to wear them. And if they say, well, when they say, well, if you don't want to wear a mask, it's some business, then you don't have to shop there. Well, you can say that about anything. You know, you could say something about, well, if you don't want to be of some religious faith, then you don't have to shop there either. So it's not a small deal that they are that when a business refuses service to somebody for their beliefs. That's been a huge issue throughout the U.S. history. Refusing service, either like a race or like if for people that or whatever, gender identity or whatever. And so it's not a small deal that businesses when they refuse service because of somebody's belief. That's considered in our society. We make so much of our social life revolves around retail establishments. When retail establishments refuse service for some reason, that's not a small matter. No, people say, well, yeah, it's just the same as no shoes, no shirt, no service. Well, I'm perfectly comfortable wearing a shirt and shoes and pants, but masks, I hate those things. They're uncomfortable. I like to call them CO2 rebreathers. You can keep rebreathing your own CO2 gases. And they're hot. And they hide, like I said before, they hide your facial expressions. It doesn't seem natural. So I'd like to do away with them for myself and anybody else that doesn't want to wear them. It's not the same as clothing requirements. And also, I think it's not the same as seatbelt requirements. I'm okay with seatbelt laws. I know maybe some people aren't, but I'm okay with them because, well, seatbelts, I find them relatively comfortable, unlike masks. And seatbelts don't make me rebreathe my own CO2 gases and lower oxygen levels and hide my facial expressions. So I'm okay with seatbelts for those reasons, but I'm not okay with masks for those reasons. So those are uncomfortable. I don't like masks. I'm sick of them. And so I'm sick of these forced social isolation laws in effect put in by the tyrannical governors. People want to isolate themselves and lock themselves in the house and live like what's his name? I forgot his name. The aviation guy. Howard Hughes. All right. Yeah. So yeah, if people want to live like Howard Hughes in his later years, when he locked himself up and just pulled himself in to like a hotel room, I think it was, or his own floor. If people want to do that, go ahead. Let them. But I think that everybody else should be let to live their lives. I mean, there's no psychological immunity to forced social isolation. But I think there is immunity that's being developed to the virus. Even if it was, like these forced lockdowns may or may not have helped earlier on, but at this point, I think the virus has reached its it's either mutated into a less virulent form, or people have developed enough immunity to it to the point where we can and should just stop all this forced isolation and forced mask wearing and go back, let her live our lives. This needs to be at least allowed a debate about that. But when you go onto the mainstream media, corporate media, they just keep stacking the deck just drilling down, the only option is this continued isolation. Anybody else that doesn't think or act in accordance with that narrative, that agenda, are treated as though they're irresponsible or uncaring. I think why aren't, but my response is why don't you care about those people who are feeling isolated, and all these business owners that are getting ruined. Their whole life's work is being ruined by these. Their whole dreams ruined by these tyrannical mandates put out by the governors, closing their businesses down or severely hampering them, for severely limiting them. Why don't you care about them? This should be open up all to debate, all sides considered, instead of just one side. The way the mainstream corporate media is they're only looking at it from one side, as though there's the only option is this draconian, heavy-handed closing down a society of treating everybody like they could be carrying the plague. This is not the plague. This is not the Black Death from the Middle Ages. This is not the bubonic plague outbreak from any stretch of the imagination, where a significant portion of the population was decimated, completely wiped out. This just doesn't even, not even in the ballpark, not even in the parking lot of the ballpark of that. And yet there's the mainstream media and many of the politicians are treating it as though this was the second or another iteration of the bubonic plagues from the Middle Ages. It is not. It's obviously not. So we shouldn't be treating it as though the current epidemic as though it was. We need to allow for for everybody to make a normative judgment about how we should be living our lives, and because our judgments are just as good, the laypersons, as the experts when it comes to normative judgments. And that's the main premise I wanted to put forth. And so I'm going to end it here. Hopefully I made my point. And I'm not sure what else to say. Yeah. Let people live their lives. Thanks for watching. Yeah.